Thank you, Ulrika. That was really enlightening, and it made us connect once again to the heart of Bharat. And whilst she was making her presentation, it was so heartening to know that we are all part of the rising India and the emerging India, which is working with global partners in co-creation of the India of tomorrow. It's really nice to see that we all are belonging now to an era which began earlier maybe with the I, that becomes to an us, and now to a we. Um it's the youth spirit that has to take this forward. And with that, I invite our second speaker. We'll take the questions after both these sessions, so I'd request all the participants to keep making notes as the speakers progress in their talk. I'd like to invite now Ms. Barbara Bulc. Uh, Reintroducing her again, she's the founder and president of Global Development Impact and SDG Collab, which is a new kind of practice disrupting silos and harnessing collective resources to foster urgent social and environmental systems change. She established the SDG Collab, which is a non-profit collaboratory for systems transformation, utilizing visual maps and co-creation to empower new change agents such as cities, youth, technology, and culture, all for the common good. We welcome you, ma'am.
Thank you. And thank you, Ulrike, for sharing such an inspiring and empowering vision. When I came here, I prepared the presentation, but after a few days of sensing many of you, spending time with you, I decided to change this presentation and speak freely. So please forgive me for maybe not having such a thoughts so put together so well. First of all, I want to share how I came here. I came here thanks to a good friend, Professor Ramesh Raskar, whom I met, I would say accidentally, but not accidentally, in Romania, in Transylvania, in Romania. I spent some time in September in his camera lab culture at MIT, and curious as I am, I of course spoke to every student that was hanging around there. And guess what? About 10 days ago, I received an email from one of the students, Vivek, followed up with Piyush, if I could come to Mumbai. I was planning to go to the World Economic Forum in Davos, where I've been about 10 times so far. And I looked at the link that Vivek and Piyush shared, and I said, wow, this is amazing. This is the future. I don't believe World Economic Forum is the future. It's a very important venue, but the future is here. The future is you, the future is us who dare to think different. And the future are the schools who dare to bring together different disciplines and provide the spaces that encourage to think different. I came to Mumbai first time, it was my first time in India, 17 years ago. At that time, I was working with President Clinton Foundation, just started. I was part of the founding management team. And I have to say, when we landed and we took a trip to our hotel, I was shocked. I did not know such a vision, which is the differences that I experienced in such a short journey. At that time, you may know that the road was still the old road, going through the slum, and it was very late at night, and all kinds of things happened. And I asked myself, what kind of vision do people have? And I would like to ask you for a moment just to close your eyes, for a moment, and just try to imagine as we are here in Mumbai, what kind of vision do you have for Mumbai? Can you see it? Can you feel it? What do you see? Where do you see yourself? How does it feel? And please keep this feeling that you have until the end of the talk. I would like to share a few things about rediscovering the vision and rediscovering your power and our power. Maybe this is the best way to present myself. That's what I like to say, that when we truly care about our world, we find the courage to think, feel, and act outside of our own and our institutional boundaries. I would like to emphasize courage to think, feel, and act, because the feeling part is often forgotten. And this is what brings us together for the common good. A little bit about myself, where I'm coming from. I was a very passionate chemistry student. Why chemistry? Because in chemistry you constantly create new structures, new connections, new networks. It's endless. You're creating a new world. And then I discovered that as a chemist, I have a very limited impact. What about having a social impact and doing a social chemistry? Building a new structure, building a new networks. So that's what I become. That was my journey. As part of that, in between, I went to Columbia Business School. I studied sociology, and so on and so on and so forth. And I was privileged that as a young woman from a little country of Slovenia, I was given an opportunity to become a CEO and open the offices of our leading company, which was a pharmaceutical company in New York. It's very unusual that you have such an opportunity as a young woman, really with no experience, but probably somebody who had trust in me and just had a gut feeling that I could do something. And I only had a gut feeling that, yes, indeed, I could do something. But of course, I did not really have the knowledge, but I was able to learn. And I think each of you have that. I am convinced. You just have to follow it. Then I would say, I like to call myself a social chemist and a steward, because what in fact I do is a stewardship. And it is this stewardship that is lacking today in society. And guess what? The stewardship can be also business opportunity. And I'm convinced there is more and more such business opportunities. So I would like to share with you a few projects that I have been involved, just to give you a little bit of a perspective. I already mentioned I had the pleasure to work with President Clinton for several years, tackling HIV/AIDS pandemic, not as a disease. The first thing we did, we reframed the problem. We said this is a security challenge. Immediately we have entirely different set of stakeholders and vision to think different at the table. I work extensively with a number of corporations and the governments, from Intel, reshaping digital health education in several countries, in health supply chains, very important, almost invisible part of the supply chain, with various distributors around the world, but never alone with one of these organizations. It was always the whole ecosystem of stakeholders and partners involved. I work extensively with the United Nations, so launching large initiative. Maybe some of you have heard Every Woman, Every Child. India was an instrumental player in that. Initially, a very weak player because maternal and child health was one of the main challenges, and I would say thanks to the international pressures and some like-minded people in the Indian government, that has become to change, but there is a long, long way to go. I became more and more passionate about youth engagement. I am convinced that this is the future, working intergenerationally, entirely transforming the way young people are engaged in the governance. They participate in the decision making in different settings. Mind Your Food with Dalai Lama Institute. Very interesting that Dalai Lama was looking into how we eat and how this makes us feel and how does it impact our choices and how does it impact our planet. Furthermore, extensively working with cities, I will share that later, and extensively working with arts and culture as a new agents of change. I would say all of these projects or initiatives have something in common, and this is not only leading with compassion, but living with compassion, and showing that this, in fact, it is possible in our current economic system as we are hopefully transforming and moving into the next form of the economic system. I don't need to explain that to all of you, that if I take you on a journey outside of India, onto the world, that's the reality that 85% have a lack of access to health, to quality education, to quality energy, and so on and so forth. It's unacceptable, 85%. Furthermore, air pollution, again, I don't need to tell you, you experience it here, Delhi, perhaps even worse, other places in India. But guess what? We live in the world without borders. This is a recent picture from China, and 8 million deaths are every year, about half of it from indoor and half of it from outdoor pollution. Again, unacceptable. 6th mass extinction. We are in the midst of it. 41% of global insects are in decline. I am coming from a country, Slovenia, that, in fact, the bee that you see here is the national insect or national animal, and it's extensive beekeeping. And we are very proud to be one of the countries who, in fact, propose to celebrate the World Bees Day, among other things. And I'm sure you have heard or you have participated. I'm, in fact, not familiar how the Friday for the Future has developed in India. This is the picture from London. I was maybe a few hundred meters away. I did not participate at the Friday for Future in London. In fact, I was at the meeting of the Nestle company. As you know, today the leading food company in the world. And guess what? Nestle was convening with the new CEO the global stakeholder meeting with a number of nonprofit investors, short and longer term investors, with some other companies looking at various social, economic, and environmental issues. There is a long way to go, but these conversations are happening, and they're happening regularly. And guess what? I mentioned I was one of those who was presenting the thoughts of the stakeholders, some of them very critical. And I reminded everybody in the room, do you know that there is a strike just a few hundred meters ago? And I have to say that there was silence in the room because there was a lack of awareness that this was going on. Huge disconnect in spite of some efforts, but these efforts need to be far stronger. We are lucky to live at a time when the humanity adopted the first of its kind framework. I'm sure you're all familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. I believe we are entering a critical decade where we make it or breaking next 10 years, how we are gonna be able to redesign, rethink, not only the systems, but our values. I think it is the values that we got it wrong. Do we value tree dead or tree alive? Do we value tuna dead or tuna alive? Based on what we value, that's how we build the systems. I really like this picture. This is anybody knows it, the way it's presented? Who did that? This is the presentation of the Sustainable Development Goals by Johan Rockström and Stockholm Resilience Institute. And I really like it because it very nicely presents the systems that we are dealing with and how they are interconnected. And not only that, the goal 17 is focused on partnerships. And that's why we are here. It is the partnerships, it is togetherness and collectivity that we need to build. And this is the critical, let's say, missing point where we are the weakest, even though we were born as children. You know how children meet each other, they socialize, it's never a problem. Yet, when we become part of the system, this has been lost. So how do we reclaim that back? How do we bring the more collective, collaborative efforts that go beyond one's own ego and current economic systems that are failing into what we need to change? I'm sure you have seen that too. This is from Gapminder. It's a dynamic presentation, but I think it's fascinating. And just looking at the role of India, it's particularly fascinating where it is today. And we don't live in the world that is developed or not developed. It's a continuum that is constantly changing. When I moved to New York to work with healthcare system, there were 40 million people uninsured. This still continues. And this is what we are dealing with today. And I would like to share with you how I am approaching it. I lead, let's say, a boutique advisory, a new kind of advisory. I have a for-profit arm and non-profit arm to allow me to work across the ecosystem. And we have simplified the Sustainable Development Goals because majority of people, to be honest, have never heard about it. But everybody has heard about the water challenges, the health challenges, education challenges, food challenges, and nutrition challenges. Malnutrition is a huge problem here. So these are the areas of the interconnected system that I work in. But not only that, who are today agents of change? I firmly believe, this is a simplified presentation, but there are at least 4 agents of change that can substantially help us move faster. Cities. I had real pleasure to visit Nasik a few days ago to see how the whole ecosystem is changing thanks to the innovation and collaboration that you have had with DISC here at the school, and it has a tremendous promise. Why? Because there is the right constellation of people who dare to think different and who came together and shared the vision. Youth movement, not only Friday for the Future. There is a number of cities around the world that have embarked on participatory budgeting models. There is a number of initiatives, for example, in healthcare space, in the non-communicable diseases, for those of you who are working on that, NCD-free. It's a self-organized organization of young people who are focusing not on treatment, but on the prevention and awareness, how to do things different in a more systemic way, and so on. Technology, critically important tool. We have heard fantastic presentation how this can be used or misused. And culture, and I will speak more about it, and I had the pleasure to be part also of the workshop with Curtis. I don't know if he's here, a really terrific mentor, and I've learned so much, and the best part of it that I was a student, and there is so much to learn, and we really had a fantastic experience. So what is it that we do? I call this disrupting silo, to harness collective resources to cultivate system change. You see these little dots, so I'm not going to go into details. So we envision, so again, we need the vision. And I think this is the critical point, is the vision. And that's where we are the weakest. And not the vision for 10 years, the vision for the generations to come. A friend of mine is writing a book about ancestor, good ancestor, that's going to come out later in the year. He's looking at 1,000 years. That's probably where China also has that kind of approach. It's not tomorrow. It is a long-term vision we need to have. And that's how we approach the dealing with these complex challenges. Of course, not everybody is interested in seeing the problems this way and seeing opportunities this way. So we consciously look at those organizations among businesses, governments, nonprofits, communities that see or are open to experience the new vision this way. Then we continue converging in various forms, like, for example, this week has been an excellent example of converging emergence using different methodologies like design thinking, but maybe going even beyond that. Beyond that, in terms that it is not the human who is in the center. We try to look at it holistically. It is, you know, the expression all one or alone. So we are all one. How can we approach it as part of the nature? And this leads to transformation. Of course, part of it are contracts, our business models, our new innovative business model. And with the right partners, this is of course possible, with public and private financing, with a lot of creativity, how to shape these initiatives that they become a sustainable business model, as well as contribute to building a new, I would say, hopefully economic reality that has social and economic impact. You have all been dealing with that. This is just an example of how we bring this together. You see, we have, I see artists as an essential component, the whole cultural sector with emotions. And I was so pleased to see the track on music and the empowerment here today. But it goes further. And I think that's maybe one of the most important messages I would like to share, that we live in the world of the old power and the new power. The majority of the world is the old power. The old power is very formal, based on evidence, is hierarchical, is regulated, and is very slow. Unfortunately, much of the academic, educational work is exactly there. Fortunately, still many corporations, many governments, and so on. But this is changing. There is a new power emerging. There is a new economy. There are new jobs emerging. River restorers, seed bankers, and so on. And what is the new power? It's informal. It's based on local knowledge. It's horizontal. It's unregulated, and it's much faster. And I think in the room, or what I sensed over the past day, that's where you are. But you are facing the future that you are thinking, so what am I going to do? if I'm a compassionate person, what I'm going to do? Well, there is the middle ground, and that's where the new solutions are coming. So using this creativity, where the old and new power converge, that's what really matters. And from my experience, and that's what I would like to share with you, is this only happens if you're also open to intergenerational collaborations. So not to go again, there are older generations or younger. I think the teams need to be built, bringing the wisdom, bringing the new ideas together. This is where the synergies are happening. This is, maybe you've seen that, this was from New York Times 3 days ago. This is from World Economic Forum in Davos. You've probably noticed the conversation, so this is a very good example of Greta and President Trump as perfect examples of new and old power. So where are solutions? Solutions are in the middle, and that's where we need to focus. Some of the groups that we are working with, but these are not just the names. I cannot show it here, but the reason we work with those groups is because the leadership or somebody on the board, probably the CEO, had a desire and a passion and a courage to be a compassionate leader. And this is how I like to choose my partners and my clients. And these numbers are growing. Perhaps interesting, I'm not sure if you can see that, it's a little bit more detailed, but the World Economic Forum did a very good study on how the partnership happened, because there are different mindsets. So do they happen by choice? Do they happen by necessity? What motivates them? Is it access to knowledge on the local context? Is it increased adoption? Is it additional expertise, financing or funding? Is it brand reputation? Influence, how do you influence regulation? And I think this is a very important piece to understand how do you build this social chemistry that also you understand very well incentives that to build those networks and partnerships further. So what do we do? What kind of tools do we use? This is one small example, in fact, was done with Columbia University students and a startup from Hawaii, Kumu. I live in Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva, as you may know, it's one of the global diplomacy hubs with over 40 international organizations. And it's also the center of global health diplomacy. And I randomly asked a lot of the experts who were coming to Geneva, so what do you think? How many decision-making organizations are based in Geneva that influence the policies and solutions in global health? So usually the answer was maybe 10, 15, 20. So we did the mapping, and there were over 80 from all stakeholder groups. And then we went further, so we mapped all of these organizations by individuals who run it, by financing, by issues, and we mapped them against the Sustainable Development Goals in order to help them see who is out there. So again, going back to vision, if you don't see the bigger picture, how are you going to change it? So for those of you who are entrepreneurs in global health space, and if you want to bring your solutions from local to global, understanding the global actors are essential. And understanding how they operate, who has interest, this can substantially help you accelerate scaling of your solutions. So again, the local knowledge with global knowledge is very important. Global actors are very often disconnected from the local reality. So again, opportunities for you is middle ground, understanding local, understanding global, and then bringing it together offers enormous opportunities, but it also requires entirely new kind of knowledge. Another example that I would like to share is how we apply, we call them smart maps or imaginal maps, is the cities. I work extensively in secondary cities. Secondary cities are these cities that offer more space for innovation. They have a drive to be first. They have spaces that are much more creative very often than the capitals. This is an example of the ecosystem map in the city Cluj, where I'm going, in fact, from Mumbai, where we are developing so-called learning hubs. And learning hubs are physical and virtual spaces where you allow the ecosystem to come together, and we serve as a steward or facilitator to help these networks, I would say, cross-pollinate and focus on specific needs. And this is the models that we are, I would say, testing in 7 cities around the world on different parts, in different continents. And this is an example of the ecosystem of different, from national governments to foundations to professional associations, NGOs, and so on. But this is not enough. So we go into details to looking into the individuals. So obviously, it's critically important to have a very, let's say, strong human intelligence, insights into the networks, and we use the AI tool from the stakeholder company called Catalyst. So combining the human intelligence with AI really allows us to accelerate and see what's happening in the system. So imagine that we would have such a map for Mumbai, and you can see it from a different lens, and it can help you identify who are your ideal partners or who you are not, and who else is there. Maybe it's somebody, or probably many of them, already duplicating the things that you do. So these kind of tools are very helpful in catalyzing collaborations, but at the core is not the technology. I would say at the core is combining technology and human intelligence, and at the core, at the end, are human relations. And that's what we very often forget. It is human relations that really make a difference, and identifying those, we don't even call them influencers, we call them imaginals, imaginals who have different qualities, different visions, say courage, and they dare to think different. That's how you can make a change. And there is a systematic methodologies to find those kind of imaginals around the world. And there are many, and they're growing. This is another example. I call it Creative Toolkit. And this is the toolkit that we are using in cities. And this is a toolkit that is produced together with designers, architects, artists, and it really helps visualize the process. The project is called Invisible, and making invisible visible, that's what it means. Because as you know, the change requires processes. People are mostly not process thinkers. They like to see products. There was a lot of discussion about products and end results. But if you want to accelerate the processes, and if you want to see, are you doing the processes well or not, that's what really matters. So here, the creative sector, so we work with, for example, the art school, with the art history, so we work with every meeting that we hold, and there are many, you can imagine in the ecosystem of the city, there are 2 or 3 artists with a methodology, they are observers. And they draw, they use different skills, so it's again methodology behind. And then we have a tool to actually present how are these communities doing, how are they behaving, what are the stories. And then at the same time, they go to the communities, work with communities, and they tell the stories from their, let's say, emotional perspectives. Then we work with the civic engagement methodology. I don't know if you're familiar, but this is a very good methodology that you actually facilitate creating a shared vision. And then you can assess, are we creating a shared vision? It's complex with a number of partners, but you can assess how you're progressing. Not only that, you can also assess, are we actually distributing the ownership? So when you work in ecosystem, it's not about ego, it's how you can distribute the ownership to other stakeholders. Very important to understand, are you actually doing it or not? Furthermore, it's something that's called persistent input. What does it mean? So if you are a steward or facilitator, how much of this persistent input do you need to have in the ecosystem? Ideally, if the ecosystem works really well, there is very little persistent input, but mostly in very rigid, I would say, old power systems that are not so open to collaboration, this persistent input that is invisible requires tremendous effort. And it's very important to know who you're working with. So we use this process barometer that provides, illustrates how we are progressing on shared vision. And at the same time, you have seen that I love maps of all kinds. My brains and my head is full of maps of all kinds. And we have created an initiative that maps communities. And they are co-created with communities, and they are used as a navigational maps that are developed very often with young people based on their own interests to actually see, I don't know, if can I have healthy food in my neighborhood? Where do I find it? Very often, people are used to their linear pathways, and they don't think there are many other opportunities. So these are the exercises that are also done in a multidisciplinary teams that can visualize the new navigational maps in collaboration also with the technologies. So based on the user experience, whatever they like to use, they can create that. Art, I mentioned, this is an example. I work extensively with arts and artists. I created an initiative that is called Art for Action. How can we utilize the creativity to mobilize other spaces outside of the artistic spaces? This is what you see on the picture is an example of collaboration with European Commission. You can see this was a meeting 2 years ago in Davos with the European Commissioner for Transport, my dear friend Tomás Saraceno, very renowned artist, architect, and polymath, who is creating what you see on the other part, let's say so-called balloons that fly only with the energy of the sun, energy of the wind, and the energy of the Mother Earth. And these are not just the balloons, they also are connected with digital devices, so you can measure the parameters in the air. In collaboration with MIT and NASA, they developed the flight predictor, so you can let it go, you can measure the new currents, and you can do extensive studying based on the community exploration. So what happened was that the commissioner, when she convened the meeting of all ministers and investors and businesses, she started the meeting in a conversation with the artist Tomás Saraceno. It was an open conversation about re-envisioning the future, the zero carbon future. It was quite exceptional, of course, with all visual presentations. And then there was a businesswoman who raised a hand, and I said, this is amazing, Thomas, but I don't understand. What is your business model? And Thomas said, I don't have one. It is you and me who need to spend time together with others to create one. And that's where we are now. That's what we need. We need visionaries who dare to think, and we need to be bold to create this new business model. This is an example of aerosine sculptures just a few months ago, where I was with Thomas in Chamonix. Mont Blanc is the highest mountain in Europe. just 1 hour away from Geneva. And this is Mont Blanc Glacier. And Mont Blanc Glacier is melting rapidly. It's incredible. I'm a big skier. I've skied the glacier several times. And when I moved to Geneva in 2006, now they have built, the stairs to see the difference, how much it has melted. It's in front of our eyes, changes are happening. So this was an activity that raised awareness also with the European Union and others what is happening, and then showing that, look, we do have solutions. We have to create new policies, new business models, new corridors, new zero carbon corridors. It's another example of aeroscene built by the communities. It's called Museo Aerosolar, and you see these are plastic bags. So if you build the right volume with the temperature different, this lifts. And this has been a self-organized community that has been emerging and raising awareness what has been happening. This is the meeting that we convened within a balloon to have an experience, to feel the experience. And the discussions were focused on how do we solve specific problems. This was specifically in Paris, where the air is quite polluted. It was hosted by the museum, but the stakeholders in this space that you see were coming from a diversity of actors. And I firmly believe that creating new spaces, with the stories where you can embody experience, it's essentially important because we have forgotten about the feelings in this kind of experience. I would like to maybe end with, this is not a poem, but it's written very poetically because systems are usually not considered to be very poetic, but this is one of my favorite thinkers and system thinkers, Donella Meadows, maybe you know her, and maybe just pause for a moment and I will read it because I think it's so beautifully presented what we often forget in today's world. And it starts with, get the beat of the system. Expose your mental models to the light. Honor, respect, and distribute information. Use language with care and enrich with system concepts. Pay attention to what is important, not just what is quantifiable. Make feedback policies for feedback systems. Go for the good of the whole. That's all one. Listen to the wisdom of the systems. Locate responsibility within the system. And I love that one. Stay humble. Stay learner. Celebrate complexity. Expand time horizons. Defy the disciplines. And expand the boundaries of caring. Thank you very much. So please reach out to me. I'll be very much looking forward to continue working with several of you that I have met. Thank you for having me here. Thank you.